Chapter 24. Hazel. Even before she got on the boat, Hazel felt queasy. She kept thinking about Phineas with steam coming out of his eyes and his hands crumbling to dust. Percy had assured her that she wasn't like Phineas, but she was. She'd done something even worse than torment harpies. "You started this whole thing," Phineas had said. "If it weren't for you, Iconius wouldn't be alive." As the boat sped down the Columbia River, Hazel tried to forget. She helped Ella make a nest out of old books and magazines that they'd liberated from the library's recycling bin. They hadn't really planned on taking the harpy with them, but Ella acted like the matter was already decided. "Friends," she muttered. 10 seasons, 1994 to 2004. Friends, melt Phineas and give Ella jerky. Ella will go with her friends." Now she was roosting comfortably in the stern, nibbling bits of jerky and reciting random lines from Charles Dickens and 50 Tricks to Teach Your Dog. Percy knelt in the bow, steering them towards the ocean with his freaky mind-over-water powers. Hazel sat next to Frank on the center bench, their shoulders touching, which made her feel as jittery as a harpy. She remembered how Frank had stood up for her in Portland, shouting, "She's a good person!" like he was ready to take on anybody who denied it. She remembered the way he looked on the hillside in Mendocino, alone on the clearing of poisoned grass, with his spear in his hand, fires burning all around him, and the ashes of 3 basilisks at his feet. A week ago, if someone had suggested that Frank was a child of Mars, Hazel would have laughed. Frank was much too sweet and gentle for that. She had always felt protective of him because of his clumsiness and his knack for getting into trouble. Since they had left camp, she saw him differently. He had more courage than she realized. He was the one looking out for her. She had to admit that the change was kind of nice. The river widened into the ocean. The packs turned north. As they sailed, Frank kept her spirits up by telling her silly jokes. "Why did the Minotaur cross the road? How many fawns does it take to change a light bulb?" He pointed out buildings along the coastline that reminded him of places in Vancouver. The sky started to darken. The sea was turning the same rusty color as Ella's wings. June 21st was almost over. The Feast of Fortuna would be happening in the evening, exactly 72 hours from now. Finally, Frank brought out some food from his pack, sodas and muffins that he'd scavenged from Phineas's table. He passed them around. "It's okay, Hazel," he said. "My mom used to say we shouldn't try to carry a problem alone, but if you don't want to talk about it, that's okay." Hazel took a shaky breath. She was afraid to talk, not just because she was embarrassed. She didn't want to black out and slip into the past. "You're right," she said. "When you guessed I came back from the underworld, I'm an escapee. I shouldn't be alive." She felt like the dam had broken. The story flooded out. She explained how her mother had summoned Pluto and fallen in love with the god. She explained her mother's wish for all the riches in the earth, and how that had turned into Hazel's curse. She described her life in New Orleans, everything except for her boyfriend Sammy. Looking at Frank, she couldn't bring herself to talk about that. She described how the voice of Guy had slowly taken over her mother's mind. She explained how they moved to Alaska, and how Hazel had helped raise the giant Iconius, and how she had died, sinking into the island, into Resurrection Bay. She knew Percy and Ella were listening, but she spoke mostly to Frank. When she'd finished, she was afraid to look at him. She wanted him to move away from her, maybe tell her she was a monster after all. Instead, he took her hand. "You sacrificed yourself to stop the giant from waking. I could never be that brave." She felt the pulse throbbing in her neck. "It wasn't bravery. I let my mother die. I cooperated with Gaia too long. I almost let her win." "Hazel," Percy said, "you stood up to a goddess all by yourself. You did the right—" His voice trailed off as if he had an unpleasant thought. "What happened in the underworld, after you died, you should have gone to Elysium. But if Nico brought you back—" "I didn't go to Elysium." Her mouth felt dry as sand. "Please don't ask me." But it was too late. She remembered her descent into the darkness, her arrival on the banks of the river Styx, and her consciousness began to slip. "Hazel," Frank asked. "Slip sliding away," Ella muttered. "Number 5 U.S. single, Paul Simon. Frank, go with her. Simon says Frank, go with her." Hazel had no idea what Ella was talking about, but her vision darkened as she clung to Frank's hand. She found herself back in the underworld, and this time, Frank was at her side.